Hi there, I'm Amanda Castor with Material Girl Quilts. And today I'm going to share with you a tutorial to make the Kansas Dugout quilt pattern. So this is a traditional block that I think traditionally is made using English paper piecing method. So I will show you quickly what a completed block would look like, and it would be right here. This looks like a donut essentially. And so when you English paper piece this block, this center white section is just one piece of fabric that you paper piece with these 4 segments here. So instead of doing that by hand in English paper piecing, we are going to learn how to do this by our machine. And instead, this is not one piece of fabric, it's actually 4 different pieces that are sewn on to the sides of these squares here. So let's get started. Now what you're going to need to make this quilt is you will need one pre-cut 10-inch square package or layer cakes. So that includes 42 pre-cut 10-inch squares, or you could use 4 separate charm packs because what we're going to end up doing is cutting each of our layer cake squares into 4 5-inch squares. So if you have 4 different charm packs that would coordinate together, you can use those from 4 different fabric collections, all from the same fabric collection. Like when you do a layer cake, like this one was done with pre-cut 10-inch squares, so it's all from the same fabric collection, but you could easily mix and match fabric collections together if you wanted to use charm packs instead. So the first thing you need to do is, if you are using the layer cakes or the pre-cut 10-inch squares, you need to cut those into 4 different 5-inch squares. And I want to make a note about cutting these. So different fabric manufacturers, if you measure them, they kind of measure a little bit differently. So most of them have a pinked edge around the outside of the pre-cut squares. And some of them, if you measure your squares, maybe the 10 inches finishes at the outside of the pinked edges. Sometimes the 10 inches is like the inside of the pinked edges. So just measure your squares in your packet so that you know where to measure from when you are cutting the squares. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this 10-inch square into 4 different 5-inch squares. So we'll measure on the 5 inches on one side and then rotate our ruler without moving our fabric, and then measure again at 5 inches and cut, and that gives us 4 5-inch squares. So now what we will do is we will take each of our 5-inch squares, for each one of those we will need 2 of our background squares, or smaller 2.5-inch background squares. And what we're going to do, as you can see when you look at the blocks here, we will be sewing them onto opposite sides of each square. So I'm going to take you to the machine and show you how to do that now. Okay, so as I stated, we are going to be sewing these small background squares onto opposite corners of our 5-inch squares. So what you will do is draw a diagonal line across the back of your background square, or if you have the 1/4-inch seam tape, you can follow that, which is what I will do. So you will sew directly on that line that you drew. And as you're piecing these, you can just chain piece and sew 1 background square on one corner of each one. And then as you complete those, you can go back and finish the other corner. But we'll go ahead and just do 2 right now. So we take our second background square on the opposite corner, and again, sew directly on that diagonal line. Now once that's sewn on opposite corners, you will then trim off these extra triangles, you will trim 1/4 inch away from your seam, and you can just toss those, and then you will press these out towards the background triangles. So again, you will press these out towards the triangles, and that will give you another 5-inch square. You will repeat this process for all of your 5-inch squares, and you will have a total of 168 of these. Now once your blocks are complete, you're going to lay those out into 14 rows of 12 blocks each, and you will alternate the direction of each of those blocks as shown in this diagram. So you will sew all of your blocks into rows and then sew the rows together to complete the center of your quilt top. You will then complete this quilt top off with a border that's cut at 5 inches. Now I will also note that for the seams on this quilt, I pressed all of the seams in this quilt top open so that they laid nice and flat. I often get asked that question, so I wanted to make sure I let you know that. And I think that this one in particular is going to be a great little picnic quilt for us, but I think that it will be great in so many different fabric collections, and especially if you have 4 different charm packs that would coordinate together. It would be such a scrappy looking quilt, and I would love to see it if you make your own. You can tag me on social media at Material Girl Quilts and use the hashtag Kansas Dugout Quilt. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please make sure you click the like button and subscribe so that you don't miss any tutorials going forward. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.